I am Tim Shirley, the senior minister of the SouthShore United Church of Christ. This is a sermon for a celebration of All Saints, November 1st. Do as I say. We have all heard the expression before, the ultimate indicator of hypocritical being and doing, thinking and acting. Do as I say and not as I do. Demanding perhaps the highest level of hubris in making such an audacious request. This demand simply has nowhere good to go. It is a recipe for disaster, threatening relationships, and all the ways we seek to go about our business, striving to maintain our integrity, being authentic, genuine in the way we approach life and everything we do. What we are all seeking from one another is honesty, consistency, and appropriate level of transparency. That what we say matches what we do, that we avoid playing mind games, reducing our lives to smoke and mirrors. Say what you mean what you say. Practice what you preach, and preach what you practice. There are some things that just really do not need tweaking, the subtlety of nuance, that do not call for interpretation and the like. Some things really are simple, straightforward, plain as day, we might say. In studying the Bible, scholars demand what is known as a consistent biblical hermeneutic when reading these ancient texts. That is a fancy or sophisticated, an academic or scholarly way of requiring the same principles, demanding that the same exacting tests, the same exacting standards, the same rubrics be applied to every text in the exact same manner. It literally creates a level textual playing field, helping the reader keep personal biases and prejudices to a minimum in an attempt to get at the heart of a given narrative, its meaning. What you do to the right, you do to the left, employing the same standards, no matter content or preference. Ah, if only life were that simple. In everything, every reality. Unfortunately, something that seems as simple and straightforward as fairness can be an arduous, a most monumental task, almost seemingly impossible, almost insurmountable. And yet we know how many problems having an equitable spirit can solve. And how much better it makes life when we adopt that level of continuity as our guiding principle as we relate to one another. As I write these words today, I am reminded that an election looms in 2 days, and that our political climate is toxic, our civic dialogue almost non-existent, revealed in partisan politics, and that seems to be manifest in countless flare-ups of uncivil behavior. I bring all this to your attention because in the witness from the Gospels in Matthew today, we see a not so subtle reprimand by Jesus towards some of the usual suspects. This time his primary duo, the oft adversarial sparring partners in the scribes and Pharisees. In many ways, Jesus' advice to the crowds in general and the disciples in particular is rather peculiar. In all honesty, Jesus seeming to do a tap dance, walking a tightrope, as he acknowledges the blatant hypocrisy inherent in the mixed messages that these religious leaders sinned. Jesus might even be accused of seeking to have it both ways, as he respects and honors their position and implied status, along with the assumed wisdom and learning that goes with perceptions real and imagined, all the while heavily critiquing them, judging them with some rather blunt and seriously sobering accusations. Yes, in some ways Jesus gives them the benefit of the doubt, all the while throwing them under the bus. I guess it is a reminder that there is good in everything, or so we hope is true. Of course, we certainly could beg to differ, however, regarding some things, painfully knowing the horrific exceptions to that maxim. Experience can be a harsh teacher. Call it the proverbial school of hard knocks. But I digress. I often do. What we discover in this text is a pervasive problem. The constant challenge confronting us, that of practicing what we preach. So typical, perhaps this narrative even being the source of this tried and true and very trusted phrase. One of the things these select verses reveal is the complicated relationship that Jesus had with numerous religious authorities, leaders with whom he could not avoid being in relationship that he could in no way ignore. Had he done so, at least in a blatant or conspicuous manner, it would have proven to be a foolish and risky move, his daring to do so at his own peril. My hunch is that subtlety and subterfuge, spy versus spy, was always an unspoken, even unacknowledged aspect of Jesus' somewhat entangled, enmeshed relationships with and toward those he knew meant him harm as their ultimate goal. So Jesus engages those with whom he differed whenever he encountered them, despite having disagreements at so many levels. Jesus was always respectful, but very forthright, calling them out about their stuff whenever the need arose, even having the audacity, the temerity to naively or boldly call them names, as we find in today's confrontational text. Yes, Jesus would dare do that, poking them in the eye on more than one occasion. It is apparent that Jesus spent a great deal of time managing the polarities that framed his various dichotomous relationships. The reader can almost feel the tension in these texts as Jesus navigates and negotiates all the existing religious rules and regulations that functioned like landmines as they strangle the life out of his Jewish contemporaries, the rank and file of every walk of life. Religion should always be a freeing thing, liberating in every way imaginable. Unfortunately, from humanity's earliest spiritual sensitivities, religion, along with its rituals, has been co-opted and used as the very antithesis, the opposite of liberation practice. It has been used to herd, to control, to assert power, to oppress, and to condemn. Who needs any of it? Who wants any of it? Perhaps the main reason that Jesus' message, its meaning and movement, was rejected by those who were in charge is that they knew that his brand of faith would diminish their authority. remove some of their power, privilege, and prestige, threatening to take away their very livelihoods. Yes, they knew they would lose a certain amount of control, surely having to give up something of significance in what would have amounted to an unbalanced transaction. They certainly had more to lose. They could not risk giving an inch at the risk of losing a mile when it came to their man-made requirements, knowing that any compromise, any vacillation would amount to a house of cards that would crumble around them and finally upon them. In their minds, they had no choice but to stick to their guns, no matter how much sense Jesus made, despite the fact that all Jesus wanted to do, was attempting to do, was to return their ancient faith, the faith tradition of their forebears, to the pure and loving, welcoming and inclusive, hospitable religious expression that it had always been intended to be, set from day one. Perhaps it once was. Perhaps it never was. The latter is usually the case with any organized religion, always appearing like a mirage at its purest essence, even assumed or supposed innocence, all in life's rearview mirror. All combined, this no doubt is the reason Jesus attained such a loyal following from among the masses, the common folk, that included everyone with little voice and certainly no vote. Jesus' interpretation of Judaism was nothing new, not an aberration or mutation of something never before seen or experienced. Despite now being a mere facsimile at best of its former self, light years from the faith manifested in the patriarchs Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, it was still not beyond hope, not beyond renewal, restoration, and reformation. As with any institution, it was only normal that it carried the baggage and the scars, the battle wounds, as it sadly devolved through the centuries, morphing to its present predicament, a poor representation. That is often the lot with any institutional enterprise, always in need of critique and correction. Who knows? Maybe Judaism in that present form had become and could be legitimately described as nothing more than a shell reduced to its former self. In the final analysis, that is a debate for historians and scholars. What is certain is that it looked very little compared to what it once had been in the skewed perception of its pristine origins. That is often the case, no doubt true with any institutional entity, particularly of the religious variety. We, of course, can say the same thing about the church and the churches, knowing that evolution is not always in the best interest of a good thing. Let's see what was going on with the scribes and Pharisees, what they were up to that raised Jesus' ire about them. Just what was it that set him off? Well, obviously, it was not their teaching, or so it seems. Jesus tells his attentive audience to listen to everything they had to say, to obey, to practice and observe the things they were saying. After all, they sat in Moses' seat, and that continued to carry with it significant weight. Surely the scribes and Pharisees, at the very least, knew the tradition and somehow managed to at least honor it, to keeping it alive, conveying it by giving it the proper lip service, it deserved. After admonishing the people with that acknowledgement, suddenly all bets were off. And Jesus becomes unhinged. Katie, bar the door. Jesus quickly goes into a tirade, accusing and condemning these religious zealots for hindering the religious work of this people, the people for whom they should have compassionately and pastorally cared, those to whom they owed a modicum of allegiance, those to whom they should have answered and been responsible. On some level, there should have been some degree of accountability, but there seemed to be none. In a perfect scenario characterized by a healthy relationship, enhancing the religious world in which they were all in covenant, commitment should have been their watchword, the guiding principle guaranteeing the protection of their flock, in no way diminishing the spiritual capacity of any of the faithful by forcing upon them the drudgery of the heaviest burdens, requiring of these congregants encumbrances of the highest order. Never should these vulnerable followers ever have been subjected to cruelties that diminished who they were, even remotely hindered in their capacity as capable human beings, their creativity handicapped, hindering if not prohibiting a productive and joyous life complete with a fulfilling spirituality. Despite being common folk, they were not gullible, just trusting. This was the toxic level of stuff that can kill the spirit and destroy the soul. Yes, this was their lot in life as the powerless living in subservient obedience to the piously powerful. Powermongers basking in the glow of their ever-growing and expanding lofty status. Today is All Saints on the liturgical calendar, an important feast day in the church year. All Saints Day always occurs on November 1st, and so today we get a rare treat, this festival falling on Sunday. But in the age of COVID, the strangest time in our land, all bets are off and all things are possible. Come to think of it, for the first time since 1944, we had a blue moon for Halloween. A blue moon occurring when a full moon appears twice in the same month. It gets its name because of the supposed bluish tint it produces. I did not see that. Boo. I bring this to your attention once again because on this day, we need a reminder of what it means to be a saint against the backdrop of the big picture of our faithful living. For today's purposes, part of that means answering the question that Jesus benignly or accidentally raises in his harsh object lesson aimed at the scribes and Pharisees. What does it mean to be humbled? To practice humility. And it is at this jumping off point that, thank God, we can leave the negativity of Jesus' arguments with his adversaries behind, while finding some positive alternatives and solutions, an outcome we all desperately need as we seek to follow Jesus as disciples committed to Christ. The other Matthean text for today is the favorite and familiar Beatitudes from the 5th chapter of Matthew, providing us the essence of what it means to live the saintly servant life advocated by Jesus. Let's quickly turn aside and see that great sight. The many things I love about Jesus was his uncanny ability to cut through the inane and the nonsense. We have another name for that. And simplify in straightforward ways that gave absolute clarity to his positions and his admonitions. The Beatitudes are so simple that it is as if they are child's play. No wonder they are a huge part of children's Bible stories at bedtime and other times. Yet despite their simplicity, there is a depth and breadth that speaks to the largesse and the substance of what we redundantly call gospel Christianity. Without commenting on each beatitude, I will leave that to the expository preachers, and you can read them again for yourself. Let me brushstroke the whole of them in plain generalities. Each of these one-liners addresses an aspect of social justice. It really is that simple, that clearly defined. It is a reminder that all of us are called to a certain attitude, a beatitude. Sidebar, just a quick reminder, you know the word beatitude is not a part of the text, found nowhere in the Bible. We are called to carry ourselves in the Spirit. It reflects the humility of seeking after those things that not only enhance our spirituality, but our humanity as well. These are the things that give us substance, traits of empathy and sympathy with the least and the greatest that do indeed make us not only human, but fully human. Dare I say it, these are the attributes that make us saints. We, along with this narrative, have now come full circle. Being a saint is not rocket science or brain surgery. It is grafted into our being when we seek to do saintly things, and those things are not complicated. It happens naturally or organically when we are loving, striving to be our best selves, attentive to our neighbor in all the many ways, the unlimited opportunities we are afforded. We succeed as saints because sainthood is simply a part of the package, a part of who we are as the created image of the divine, an inherent gift granted us no matter our merit. And there is no meritocracy in this faith enterprise we call Christianity. As we seek to follow Jesus and serve Christ by serving our neighbors, every now and then it behooves us to reduce the complexities of our lives to the least common denominator, to simplify, to take a deep breath and relax. Inhale, exhale, breathe in, breathe out. And to embrace the basics of what it means to be a follower of Jesus and to just be a good person. Surely that is not too much to ask. If that is what it means to be godly, the biblical equivalent of perfect, then so be it. Wonderful. Jesus calls us to be socially just in every matter that confronts and confounds our society, to make a difference in our little part, our little corner of the world. Knowing that when we were able to do that, to accomplish those small things, that we have made a huge seismic difference, a global universal difference of the highest order. With every change, we change the world, and as we know at so many levels, that can be a very good or a very bad thing. Our words and actions matter every time, all the time. As individuals and as a congregation, our highest calling is simply to be there for others, walking in their shoes if we are able, enhancing their journeys, making life just a little bit easier as they discover their path and travel their roads. I guess you could say we are all always becoming saints on steroids. being purified and perfected in every way. As always, it is always about the journey, always about the process. And as the old gospel song says and sings, what a day of rejoicing that will be. Saints then, saints now, saints later, saints forever. Always saints in training. God's grace for traveling mercies. What an exciting adventure. What a glorious and gracious gift. In the name of the one who creates, redeems, and sustains, and calls us children of God, saints all, with every benefit that intimate relationship affords and suggests. Amen and amen.